Welcome to the latest episode of Climate Pioneers, featuring visionaries and innovators changing the face of corporate climate strategy. I am pleased to welcome the Chief Sustainability Officer of PepsiCo, Jim Andrew. I'm going to get into his bio in a moment, but first I'm going to say, hey, Jim, hi.
Hey, Heather, great to see you. Thanks.
Great. I was reading up on you before we decided to record, and this is the getting to know you portion of the interview. I saw that you started your career with Boston Consulting Group, Chief Strategy and Innovation Officer for Royal Philips, which is something that's a cool background. Named your position in 2020 after 4 years with PepsiCo, but you have very little sustainability in your background. You have a deep background in strategy, innovation, and digital transformation. So one of the first things I'm going to ask you is, like, how did your role with these other places pull you into sustainability, and what drew you there?
Yeah, it's a great question, one I get asked all the time. I characterize myself as a business guy with a real passion for sustainability. When I was at Philips, I, over time, collected a number of different roles, one of which was sustainability, which was really my first formal exposure. But I grew up camping and doing all sorts of outdoor activities. So it's always been, nature and all has always been a part of my life. But when I got to PepsiCo, I started originally as head of strategy and venturing, and then ran some of our businesses, including what we at the time called Beyond the Bottle, which is how do we take all our brands and help them move into different forms that are, use less packaging. So soda stream, powders, tablets, things like that. And then as that transitioned, our CEO, Ramon LaGuarta, asked me, would I take over sustainability? We had just created a chief sustainability officer position, and asked me if I would do it, saying, it's basically the same thing as you're doing now. Now, of course, it wasn't exactly the same thing that I was already doing.
Basically the same thing.
Correct. But I was, really excited about the opportunity. And he said, look, you were a key part of helping to build the strategy when I came on. And now what I want to do is put sustainability squarely in the center of the strategy. PepsiCo had been doing a lot of stuff in sustainability for a long period of time, but it was really, how do we take it to another level and fully integrate it in all the parts of the business? And I asked him a question that, I think follows neatly onto what you said, which was, well, why me? Why me? I don't have an environmental engineering background. And he said, what you've shown in the time you've been here, which at that time was only a few years, is you can get stuff done inside of PepsiCo, and that's hard to do, and that's what I need here. So with that, and knowing his personal commitment to it, I was thrilled to accept the role and have had a great time just driving forward what we now call PepsiCo Positive, deep into the heart of the strategy in the company.
Yeah, and so you do report to him, correct? You report to the CEO?
I do.
Okay. And I'm to go back to that, it's essentially the same. Hey, no, probably it isn't essentially the same. So what's different? What's the same?
Well, running a business, and I tell you, running a business was great preparation for the role that I have now, because everything lands in a business. Things don't happen at headquarters in sustainability, they happen in our businesses. And so every day I'm talking to my peers on the executive committee, in particular the CEOs of the businesses. What is it we're going to do? How do we do this? And understanding the tensions and the trade-offs of these things may cost money. These things may require resources. There's always, business is about trade-offs. Life's about trade-offs, but we won't go there. But, business is about trade-offs. How do you make those? And I think having been on the other side of the P&L, which I also was at Philips, and running big P&Ls really allows me to have a deep understanding of the challenges, the trade-offs, the opportunities, and the practical on-the-ground things that it takes to make happen. I mean, for example, if we're going to do something around water use efficiency in a plant, it might require that a large part of the plant be shut down. Well, we shut down our plants 1 or 2 times a year for maintenance, but those times are very carefully planned, far in advance, and there's a lot of things that got to happen. If you don't understand that, you might just think, well, this is easy and it's obvious and it'll save a little bit of money and it's the right thing to do, but it's far, far, far more complicated than that. And so I think having run businesses actually allows me to be a better partner to our businesses when it comes to really making sustainability happen.
Mhm. So actually, you just mentioned some of the people that you meet with, the CEOs of each business line. Who do you spend the most time with in the C-suite in terms of your peers, and why?
Well, I certainly spent a lot of time with our CEO, with Ramon, because if that is not a good alignment, that things won't happen. But as I said, I also spent a lot of time with our business CEOs. Spent a lot of time with our CFO, because you got to pay for these things and make business cases. I spend a lot of time with our head of supply chain, because a lot of it falls in areas that he touches or influences, everything from the water use efficiency example, as I was mentioning earlier, all the way to agronomy. We have a huge agricultural footprint, and a lot of that falls into our supply chain area. So a lot of time with our head of marketing, chief marketing officer, because how do we communicate what we're doing to consumers, to customers in ways that are relevant? With our corporate affairs leader, because obviously public policy communications, with our head of people, because we've got over 300,000 associates. How do we have this touch and become part of the fabric of the company and the role everybody does? So I end up talking with really R&D, of course, on the product portfolio. So I end up talking with pretty much all my peers on a pretty regular basis.
What is pretty regular?
Oh, I would say everything from a couple of times a week to, it would be rare if there was somebody that I didn't talk to every 2 or 3 weeks very consistently. I always say sustainability is a team sport, and it really is. And certainly at PepsiCo, we need everybody, and we have everybody as part of the team. But it's also a full body contact team sport. So you got to be out there, you got to be talking to people, you got to be having those conversations.
Yeah. So I want to go back to the Philips experience because it's a very different industry. So what intrigued you about this industry?
Well, I've always loved food and beverage, and I've worked in and around food and agriculture for much of my career. Phillips, I did not, with one exception, which is we actually had a excuse me, we actually had a horticulture lighting business.
Hmm. So for like greenhouses and so forth.
Right. So greenhouses, and how do vertical farms, and that
Hmm.
business reported to me, and how do we actually use light and light recipes to be able to improve the efficiency and effectiveness of vertical farms. And so that was really the only thing I did at Phillips in agriculture. But when I was in consulting, I consulted over the years to really the entire food system value chain, everybody from seeds and input suppliers all the way through to processing. In business school, I actually took a course in agribusiness. So it's always been something I've been very interested in. Just this week, I was back with my business school professor, Dr. Ray Goldberg, who's really one of the giants of the field, and he every year convenes a weekend get together of a really interesting and diverse group of people from across the food system. And this weekend was the annual event, so I was very honored to be a part of that. And we had some really good, tough discussions about what does it take to transform the food system. So when I had the chance to come to PepsiCo, it's a business that I and an industry that I know and love, and it's been a lot of fun to get back into it. And I spent a lot of time on farms, but it's also, I like to eat, so it's also great to be able to have products you can walk into the store and take them home and eat and drink them.
Great. So sorry, I'm gonna go back to the weekend. Anything you learned with that gathering that you hadn't thought about, or something that you're thinking differently about now after that gathering?
Yeah, my goal in meetings like that is to always learn a lot. And so again, here we had it's Chatham House rules, so I can't tell you who or what, but it was about, I guess, about 80 people, from across academia, NGOs, governments, philanthropy, organization, big development financial organizations, corporations, and others, but large corporations, small corporations, and everywhere in between. And so it was really interesting to hear a very diverse set of perspectives and differences on, what is it we're trying to do? How do we do it? And then, excuse me, with a global footprint, because obviously the U.S. was probably the bulk of the conversation, but certainly not. You had people that spent a lot of time in developing Africa or India or China, all of which are places that are important to PepsiCo because we're active in 200 countries and territories around the world. So my goal always is to listen and to learn a lot, contribute what I can, and then walk away with a set of people to follow up with, which I certainly did here, and a lot of new learning.
Yeah, listen, one of the things that your company did earlier this year, I think it was in May, that some other companies have done is reset its targets, right? So you came out and said, "Hey, listen, we're gonna make some adjustments." What prompted the reset? Why did you come out and say, "Okay, we're gonna change the way we think about things slightly differently"?
Yeah, great question. We so the starting point was we had a set of goals that were like many companies, 2025 goals, and so that was a natural event to at least for those goals. But as I thought about it, I also said, look, we've been at this now for almost 5 years with PepsiCo Positive. We formally announced in September of 2021, and that's really our holistic transformation to put sustainability in the center of our strategy, as we were talking about earlier. So we've been at it 4 or 5 years because you really start working on it in 2020 to be ready to go in 2021. And so we had learned a lot, and the world had changed a lot. And so it was a natural time. So we stepped back and said, let's look at all the goals and let's understand, where are we? What have we learned? What's going well? Where are there challenges? Where are things working the way we thought they would? Where are there areas that didn't? If we haven't learned anything in 4 or 5 years, then, shame on us, because certainly a lot of things are different. And so as we did that, we looked across the full suite of goals, and we found some where we could be more aggressive, where we could increase either the aspiration or the alignment. And I'm happy to talk about those. We found others that we felt really good about where they were and we were making progress. And we found others where generally some of the things that we had assumed were going to happen hadn't happened, or probably had happened more slowly than we had thought, and really that the world had thought of at the time. And I would say packaging is a great example of that. One of the things I've learned in this role overall is there's things that individual companies can do, and there's a range of aspiration and commitment to doing those things by different types of companies. But there is also a tremendous amount that's dependent on the systems that we're all a part of. And just to take one example, our scope 3 is 94% of our total emissions. So one of the goal changes that we made was we moved our timeline to 2050. At the same time, increased the alignment of our goals with the latest science so that they're now all 1.5 aligned. So we increased the alignment and the aspiration on that by making it 1.5. And the reason we looked and said our goal had originally been 2040, 10 years earlier than the Paris Accords. But again, what had we learned? Basically, every country in the world is lining up at 2050, or in many cases beyond 2050. And so when you're 94% scope 3, you can't move a system as big as ours around the world faster than the whole world is moving. It's just unrealistic. So we said 2050 is much better aligned with what the world is doing. And at the same time, science has become ever more clear. And so we said, let's make sure that our scope 1, scope 2, and scope 3 goals, which we report on, many companies don't, our scope 3 goal is aligned with 1.5 degrees. Before it had been well below 2, so now all the climate accounting geeks are really tuned into this conversation. But it was, well below 2. Now it's aligned with 1.5. And we established a flag and a non-flag target. And all of those goals are 1.5 aligned. So that's an example of the kind of system change that we'd made. We also said in regenerative agriculture, which to us, people think of us as a very large beverage company, and of course we are, but we're an even bigger food company. We're roughly 60% food. And so we have a very large agricultural footprint. And we had a goal originally of 7 million acres to bring regenerative practices to 7 million acres. And we were making good progress on that. In 2024, we had working with farmers around the world. We've got about 300,000 farmers in our direct and indirect supply chain. And working with them, we were at 3.5 million acres. So we said that goal we feel like we can increase, make that one more aggressive. So we've raised that goal to 10 million. And then we've added protect and restore as part of that to more explicitly bring in the nature components, because we know that a farm is actually part of a broader natural ecosystem. So those are just a couple examples of the kind of things we did and sort of the thinking behind it. The final thing I'd say is we wanted to be as transparent as possible, because I always say transparency plus accountability equals trust. And we wanted to be very transparent about our goals, what was changing, why it was changing, what wasn't changing. There were no Easter eggs. I mean, it was all there. If you wanted to wade through the footnotes and understand the logic, we tried to make it as clear as possible. And then we also had a very simple summary. So if you wanted to hit the high points, you could do that. And we hold ourselves accountable. We report about the things, and we were clear on what's working, what's not, why we need it. And that, as I say, ultimately, we hope builds trust, because that's the foundation for so much of the collaboration that the world needs.
Yeah, so I'm going to do an acronym check on you from a couple minutes ago. FLAG, right?
Yep.
So
FLAG is forest and land and agriculture. So it's as a large agriculturally based company, SBTI, Science-Based Target Initiative, requires us to set what's called FLAG and E&I. Energy and industry. And so our scope 3 then had to be broken into 2 pieces. And that was another 2025 impetus. Thank you for
so
that.
What gave you that's a pretty ambitious regenerative ag goal, right? What gave you the confidence to boost that up? And also give us some context, like what percentage of the land that is required to support PepsiCo, like, is that all of it? Is that part of it? What percentage of it?
Yeah, it's a substantial majority. So it's well over half. And the number in any given year varies some based on a whole set of, we're talking about Mother Nature and agriculture. So that number will vary. So we don't nail down a very particular number, but 10 million is a substantial majority. 10 million is, somebody told me it's 50 New York cities, including all 5 boroughs. So it's a lot of land. I think it makes us, one of the top, somewhere in the 40s in the states of the U.S. So it's a lot of land that, again, those 300,000 odd farmers are utilizing around the world. What made us confident was, obviously I've got a great team, and a great team that is around the world working, not only the team in the sustainability team, but also people, as I mentioned earlier, in supply chain, in R&D, in procurement, right? It's again, a team sport. But just as importantly, arguably more importantly, is we've got a huge set of partners and collaborators externally. When you're talking about agriculture and you're talking about things like regenerative agriculture, you got to start with the farmer. If the farmer is not in the center of everything you do, you're going to fail. And so it always starts with the farmer. And we try and make sure that everything we do is aligned. So we actually have not only an acre goal, but we also have a farmer livelihood goal for farmers in their communities. Because if farmers are business people, and if they don't make enough money, and there's tremendous stress right now in the U.S. farming community, that was one of the things that really came up. My team was aware. We've talked about it, but it really came out this weekend because there were a number of farmers in the room, and they said, the number, different people had slightly different numbers, but roughly half of all the farmers in America right now are under severe financial stress. I mean, severe, like on the edge of bankruptcy kind of stress is what people were saying. So when you talk about that, farmers have to make a living, and they get one chance a year. And if they're not successful at farming, I mean, that's literally how they put bread on the table, no pun intended. So if they don't, they're going to go do something else. They'll put a data center on that land, or a wind farm, or solar panels, or they'll sell it to a absentee landlord, all sorts of things. And so we need to keep farmers farming. The reason that we felt we were able to be successful is we've developed, again, coming back to what I was saying earlier around trust, a set of relationships with farmers, with the and every farmer is independent, with farmers, with implementers, so those hyper local knowledge partners that work with the farmers, with other companies. We partner with a whole set of other companies that share our goals, with in a few cases funders. I wish there were more people funding this, but it's really, how do we build that ecosystem of collaboration to be able to strengthen that network? And we just, over time, our teams have done a great job at working with partners. A number of people this weekend and at Climate Week, which I know you were at as well, came up to me and said, look, you all are the people we like to partner with because you get it. And that, not only did that make me feel good from a functioning standpoint, it made me feel good because that's an important part of doing our job. We got to listen.
So I'm aware of some of the crops that are particularly challenging right now for the U.S. farmers, but what crops are you prioritizing in that regenerative ag goal, right? So there's probably ways that you can boost that up more quickly. What are you prioritizing?
Yeah, well, and just a little bit of context, we source about 50 major crops from about 60 countries around the world. We look to go local first whenever possible. A number of our crops the crops that we source don't travel particularly well. So we like to be local, but also it supports the communities and supports the consumers. So, the big acreage, oats for us is a very important crop. We own Quaker Oats. That's a very important crop for us. Corn for things like Doritos is a very important crop. Potatoes, obviously, Lay's maybe the largest food brand in the world. Nothing more than potatoes, a little bit of salt, a little bit of oil. It's the same kind of thing. Different cooking cultures have made in their kitchens for tens of thousands of years, or thousands of years anyway. So potatoes. So I would say, those are some of the major, but again, we work across the entire set of crops we have, depending on the very local needs. All farming is local. And so we work that way. Again, we work with a great set of partners, both those in the systems and then those who cut across multiple geographies like Cargill, ADM, and others, So
yeah, one of the challenges with regenerative agriculture is it doesn't take that one cycle to get it into place, and plus we have a very dire financial situation. Again, particularly I'm thinking U.S. centric right now, but how do you help support the farmers? Like, how do you convince them that they should be doing this? I mean, like, if you're living hand to mouth, no pun intended, how can you make that kind of investment? And especially since you mentioned before, the financial, there's not a lot of finance focused on this space. So what is it that something like a company like a PepsiCo can do to ameliorate that situation?
Yeah, it's a great question. And again, a big topic of conversation both this weekend and at Climate Week. I think, many farmers know that moving to regenerative practices are better for their farms. They're better for the soil, first and foremost. They help them be more resilient. They all over time will help them be more successful. I mean, there were some really impassioned farmers this weekend who said, look, the only reason I'm in business is because I farm regeneratively and I have lower costs. And because I have lower costs, and I'm a market taker, I'm a price taker, because they were in beans and corn and big market commodities, but I'm much lower cost. And so my neighbors are going out of business and I'm doing okay because I'm a much lower cost producer. So I think farmers often know that it's better. The transition is the real challenge, and we found that there's three things that really matter. Having been at this for quite a while, and again working with a lot of really smart partners, there's really three things. The first is financial. The second is technical. They need technical advice, and the third is kind of call it social, cultural. And let me just take each of those, and I'll start with financial. Financial, there's a lot of studies. Most of them agree on at least one or two things, and one of them is there's a transition period. You end up on the other side, which is generally 3 to 4 years. You end up better off, but you got to get from here to there, and that's where companies like PepsiCo, we help fund those transitions by providing money for practices. So we year and a half ago probably announced a $216 million investment in 3 farmer-facing organizations. Again, those hyper local organizations, and in our contracts we write, and again we work with great partners, so don't get me wrong, but we put in the contracts how much money has to get to the farmers, because if the money gets siphoned off by companies in the middle or anybody, the money needs to get to the farmers. And so we work very hard to make sure that that's the case, and we work with partners that are of the same mind. But they need the financial support to plant a cover crop. If you're going to plant a cover crop, it costs more money. If once you see that it works and you see the good things and you see the impact that it has, then we'll find times when we'll pay to help a farmer transition maybe 40 acres, because no farmer does everything the first year. Nobody would want to, but they'll do it 40, and then the next year they'll go and do 400 because they saw the benefit on the 40. So we'll pay to help them adopt those practices. The second, though, is technical advice. What do I do? Every farm is different. Most farms are different many times over inside a given farmer's acreage. What do I plant? What do I do? Is my issue cover crops, or should I be thinking about tillage practices? Or is the issue, soil and water infiltration? So providing that technical advice that's not only good technical advice, but trusted technical advice, super important. And then the third is, I got to know it's going to work, and I don't want to be alone. I don't want to be alone. I was in Iowa, and I was talking with a farmer, and he said, "You know what the biggest problem with regenerative agriculture is? It's not that I know it doesn't work. I've been doing it for a long time. My father started with it. A big windstorm comes through, my farm's still standing. The guy next to me, his farm is
blown away. Yeah,
blown away. And that's the. Oh, by the way, that's the best advertisement for regenerative practices. When somebody looks and says, again, one of the guys this weekend was saying, I got into my fields 2 to 3 weeks earlier. I'm already done harvesting, and my neighbors are just starting to harvest, and now they're running into the fall rains, and they're running into all sorts of problems. Those things stick with farmers. It really gets to the third point, which is, how do we help farmers with peer-to-peer learning and seeing is believing? So we have a network of demo farms around the world, and we have farmer-run test plots, because they don't want to be alone. Oh, my story was, he said the biggest problem was, I go to church on Sundays, and everybody, I know that they're talking about me because I have a dirty field. I've gone no-till, and I know it's better, but they all have these beautiful black fields. And I know they're just blowing topsoil into my field, which I am very appreciative of. But still, there's the social stigma. Is he a good farmer? His field's dirty. And so, how do we help people with building that social, that cultural, so to where regenerative practices become much more mainstream? Give them other people to talk to, other farmers who are doing it, who are in their geography, is a really important part. So financial, technical, and cultural all have to come together if you really want to help farmers make the changes that, again, they know most of the time, they know this is the right thing to do. They're just saying, help me get there.
Okay. I could spend like another half hour on this, but I can't.
But
So I'm going to go to some leadership insights now. Just 4 or 5 questions I asked everyone. Your answer, and keep it succinctish.
okay.
Okay.
It was like the lightning round.
The lightning round, although I may ask a follow-up. So, so what was the biggest mistake you've made in your current role, and what did you learn from it?
The biggest mistake I made in my current role was underestimating the complexity of changing and the complexity and importance of changing the systems as opposed to changing just PepsiCo. Trust me, PepsiCo's a massive company, so changing PepsiCo is hard. But the systems, and I would say the biggest thing about the systems is I'm used to lots of, let's call them arguments. I'm used to lots of discussions and lots of good debate around how are we going to get from A to B. What I often find when we're talking about the food system is people don't agree. It's not how we going to get there. They got different versions of there. And there's almost no chance of getting there if everybody thinks it's a different there. And I think until we get alignment, or at least better alignment, that it's going to be very hard to move at the speed and the scale that's necessary. We're going to keep trying. We're going to keep trying to do our part. But there has to be agreement on the there. And I would say, for example, it's the adoption at an accelerator rate of regenerative practices on more and more farms and more land. Now, other people would disagree with that, but until we get alignment on what it is we're trying to do, it's hard to get the whole system aligned. So candidly, I underestimated how hard that was going to be. That's all right. You learn from your mistakes and you keep moving forward.
Right. So what's the best way to change a no into a yes?
I've found, and as a consultant, as a business leader in a bunch of different cultures, and I've lived in India and Southeast Asia as well, people very, very, very rarely, don't ever assume people are irrational. They're irrational from their own point of view. And if somebody is saying no, the first thing that I try and do is understand, is to listen and to understand what's behind that. Because if I think that something is logical and makes sense to do, and they are arguing against it, if I don't understand why they're arguing against it, there's very little chance of us coming to an answer. We're just going to keep disagreeing. And I'm all about problem solving. And so what I try and do is listen and understand. And a lot of times, the reason that somebody is going to disagree is not what it first seems like on the surface. And we all know that from real life. So let's understand what that really is. And then there may be a way to give them that and still accomplish what the original objective from my point of view was. And we both, win. I hate to be so trite as win-win. I don't think it's win-win. I think it's win and win, right? Because you're answering two different questions a lot of times. And if you can pull apart what seems to be a disagreement, you find that underneath it, there's two questions or two different objectives. It's honestly a lot easier to solve for two different objectives than to solve for just fundamentally different points of view on one objective. So I always listen first, try and understand where the other person's coming from, and then see if there's not a solve in there somewhere. And a lot of times there is. Not always, but a lot of times there is.
So how are you and your team using AI?
Oh, yeah. You said you don't have much time left. We can go all day on that.
Okay, sorry.
We could go, so I have no doubt that AI, in particular, generative AI, is going to be like any other big, an analogy you want to use. Let's say electricity. It's going to change everything. And I always say it's not the first order effects. Most people can understand the first order effects. It's the second, the third order effects that are extremely difficult to really understand and to see where things are going. And so we're using it everywhere we can. I've told everybody on my team across the world that I want to be the leading function. I want to be the leading sustainability team in the world, and I want to be the leading I want to be the leading function in PepsiCo at driving the use of AI. I don't know where it's all going to go, but it's a set of individual experience, and we have let me put one caveat around it. PepsiCo is a very good framework for responsible AI. And we've had very strong leadership on that. It's something that's super important. So everything I'm about to say kind of goes in the context of all of the things you would want on responsible AI. And we were one of the leading companies that really put together the first adoption of a responsible AI principles. Now, with that, I want to be first. I want individual experiments. I want personal productivity. And I want to find out where we can use it. So we've got a lot of test, learn, experiments going, again, within that framework to use it. A great example is how do you use AI to support farmers on irrigation in high water stress areas? There's a whole set of things. The better you get at that, again, farmers are going to pay less money because water in those places does tend to be at least a little bit more expensive. They will get better results. They will, and they'll have a lighter environmental footprint. How do you use all the latest tools? Can you combine that with drones that are also using AI, right? So we're looking at, again, working with partners. How do we put all those things together? So we're using it everywhere we can, responsibly, with the farmer at the center, to really drive better results for the farmers and ultimately for the planet and the company.
Okay. So 2 more. Who do you consult for a reality check?
Well, it depends. It depends a lot on the topic. What I'm always looking for, and I would differentiate reality check from I don't know something. Because if you don't know something, there's usually a reality check is, am I thinking about this the right way? And am I coming up with at least not the wrong conclusion? And so it needs somebody that I trust. It needs somebody that knows me pretty well. And it needs somebody who knows enough about the topic to be able to have an informed point of view. And that's why I say it depends, because if it's a really knotty personnel issue, I've got a couple of people who have known me for a long time who, and obviously you always have to respect confidentiality, which is really important. But I've got a couple of people inside of PepsiCo who I really trust their judgment. They know me. I worked with them at some point. Frequently, I'm not working with them anymore. But they would be great on that. If it's a question on how do we approach a new partner on funding, and what's the right way to structure a deal that is fair to both parties, and here's how I'm thinking about it, there might be somebody else. So a lot depends, but those are sort of the criteria I use when I'm thinking about it. And I do think it's a great question, because I think it's really important to get reality checks, because we don't know what our blind spots are until somebody points them out.
Right. And what would you tell your 21-year-old self?
Now you really don't have enough time. But, but what I would say the most important thing is know what's important to you. Know where your red lines are. And we all have red lines, and sometimes we don't know what they are, and sometimes they change. But at any point in time, know what's really important to you, because life's about trade-offs, but there's some trade-offs you don't want to make. That would be one thing. The second would be business, life, but if we're sticking in the business realm, it's really all about the people. It's basically all about the people. I grew up in consulting, which is a people business, but I would say Philips, PepsiCo, those are all people businesses too. So it's really about the people. And then maybe the third thing would be, don't forget to laugh. Yeah, we've had a good time here. We've laughed a few times, and don't forget to laugh, and don't ever lose the ability to laugh at yourself. because I've made plenty of mistakes. Make sure you learn from them, but try not to make the same mistake more than maybe 2 or 3 times, but no more. But don't forget to laugh about them either, because we're all imperfect human beings, and laughter goes a long way.
Yeah, it sure does. Thank you, Jim, for joining me today. I really appreciate it.
Well, Heather, thank you. Great to see you, and really appreciate the opportunity. And as always, a lot of fun, and we laughed.
Yeah, thank you. And thanks to the audience today. I really appreciate that as well. Look for our coverage of this in the Trellis briefing newsletter. You can get to the site and sign up, and look forward to other interviews in the future. Thanks so much.
Thank you. Regular reader. Love the newsletter.